The 1st of September, 1939. Nazi Germany invades Poland, which marks the beginning of the Second World War. After Warsaw officially surrenders to the Germans on the 28th of September 1939, the Germans launch a campaign of terror intended to destroy the Polish nation and culture, and to reduce the Poles to a leaderless population of peasants and workers laboring for German masters. Hitler intends to Germanize Poland by replacing the Polish population with German colonists, and only enough Poles will be retained as are needed for basic labor. The rest will be driven out or killed. In the fall of 1941, Nazi Germany begins to implement a plan codenamed Operation Reinhard to systematically murder almost 2 million Jews living in the German-administered territory of occupied Poland, called the General Government. 3 killing centers are established as part of this plan: Belzec, Treblinka, and Sobibor. The first Commandant of Sobibor becomes Franz Stangl. Franz Paul Stangl was born on the 26th of March 1908 in the town of Altmünster, then part of Austria-Hungary. He had a strict upbringing and was severely beaten by his father, who allegedly died of malnutrition when young Stangl was just 8 years old. After finishing elementary school, Stangl completed an apprenticeship at a local textile factory in just 3 years, quickly becoming the youngest textile master in Austria in 1927. 2 years later, he was already supervising 15 workers. In the evenings, he played the zither and taught music, while on weekends he worked on building his own boat. He later described this time as the happiest period of his life. Noticing the declining health of his colleagues, Stangl decided to pursue a new career, and in early 1931, he joined the Austrian Federal Police. In 1935, Stangl got married. With his wife Teresa, he had 3 daughters: Brigitte, born in 1936, Renate, born 1 year later, and Isolde, who was born in 1944. In the spring of 1938, Adolf Hitler annexed the federal state of Austria into the German Reich. The Anschluss, as it became known, took place over 3 days between the 11th and 13th of March 1938. 2 months later, Stangl joined the SS. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. The following year, Stangl began working for the Nazi Euthanasia Program, codenamed T4, which involved the systematic murder of institutionalized patients with disabilities in Germany. As the administrative and office director at the Hartheim killing center near Austria and Linz, Stangl played a key role in managing the day-to-day processes of the mass killings. He was responsible for issuing false death certificates and maintaining contact with the victims' families. Stangl also served as a deputy to Christian Wert and later Franz Reichleitner, who would become 2 leading Holocaust perpetrators. To Hartheim and other killing centers, patients were transported by bus or by rail to their deaths. In these centers, the Nazis employed gas chambers, shootings, and lethal injections to eliminate those deemed unworthy of life, including residents of welfare institutions, some concentration camp inmates, the chronically ill, the mentally and physically disabled, homosexuals, and even sick German soldiers. Despite the horrors unfolding around them, life for the Hartheim staff took on a disturbingly casual tone. While the euthanasia doctor, Georg Renno, gave flute concerts in the courtyard of Hartheim Castle on Sundays, Stangl played the zither. In April 1942, Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, appointed Stangl as the first Commandant of Sobibor extermination camp, located in German-occupied Poland. After the war, Stangl claimed that he was initially told that Sobibor was merely a supply camp for the army, and that he only learned the camp's true purpose when he discovered a gas chamber hidden in the woods. Odilo Globocnik, a high-ranking SS officer and Stangl's superior, informed him that if the Jews were not working hard enough, he had full authority to kill them, and Globocnik would simply send replacements. With such unchecked power, Stangl's sense of control over life and death became disturbingly routine. Stanisław Schmeissner, a Holocaust survivor who was forced to make gold jewelry for the SS officers, remembered Stangl as an arrogant man who took obvious pleasure in his role. Schmeissner recalled, "None of the others, although they were, in different ways, so much worse than he, showed this to such an extent. He had this perpetual smile on his face." Although Stangl was not known for physically beating prisoners like some of the other officers, his cruelty was more subtle, as demonstrated by his cold and calculated actions. In the spring of 1942, a Jewish woman from the nearby town of Chelm arrived at Sobibor searching for her husband, who had been deported with a Jewish transport. She was brought to Stangl and pleaded with him to let her see her husband. The woman had no knowledge of what was happening at Sobibor, or that her husband had already been gassed. Stangl called over SS officer Alfred Ittner and ordered him to take the woman to Camp 3, the extermination area with gas chambers and mass graves. As the woman turned her back to Stangl, he made a gesture to Ittner, mimicking the pulling of a trigger, clearly indicating that she was to be shot. Ittner escorted the woman to Camp 3 and handed her over to the Ukrainian guard on duty, who then shot her. On his way back from Camp 3, Ittner encouraged Stangl, who asked if he had shot the woman himself. When Ittner replied that the Ukrainian guard had done it, Stangl sneered, "You coward." Stangl's behavior was just one example of the mindset shared by the officers at Sobibor. After the war, Erich Bauer, a Nazi SS officer, testified about a conversation he overheard in the canteen at Sobibor between Karl Frenzel, Gustav Wagner, and Franz Stangl. They were discussing the number of victims in the extermination camps of Belzec, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Shockingly, they expressed regret that Sobibor came last in this grim competition. Franz Stangl was also a sexual deviant. Bauer, who worked at Sobibor together with Franz Stangl, testified that Stangl and others had been involved in sexual orgies with Jewish women. According to his testimony, on one occasion, Stangl with other SS men would visit Ruth and Gisela, two women from Austria, who were film and theater actresses in a Forester house, gang rape them, and then have them shot. Because he lived in a room above, Bauer complained that because of the noisy sex parties that they were conducting in the Forester house, he was not able to fall asleep after coming home from a long journey. At the time that Stangl was raping Jewish women at Sobibor, he had a wife and 2 children at home. In total, at least 167,000 people were murdered at Sobibor, making it the 4th deadliest Nazi camp after Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Belzec. More than 100,000 Jews are believed to have been killed while Stangl was in charge of the camp. In August 1942, Odilo Globocnik ordered Stangl to take over as Commandant of Treblinka, a newly opened but chaotic death camp that was under the incompetent leadership of Irmfried Ebel. Globocnik trusted Stangl to restore order, as he had earned a reputation as a highly competent administrator with excellent people management skills and a strong attention to detail. Years later, Stangl vividly described his arrival at Treblinka. As he rode in an SS-driven car, he sensed what lay ahead long before he reached the camp. About 15 or 20 minutes from Treblinka, bodies began appearing along the roadside, at first just 1 or 2, but soon they became more frequent. By the time he arrived at the station, hundreds of bodies lay in the heat, decomposing. A train full of Jews stood on the tracks, some already dead, others still alive, all trapped together for days, waiting for their impending death. When Stangl entered the camp and stepped onto the sorting square, he found himself knee-deep in money. He recalled, "I didn't know where to turn or where to go. I was trudging through banknotes, coins, precious stones, clothes. The entire square was littered with them. The stench was indescribable. There were hundreds, no thousands of corpses everywhere, decomposing, rotting." Stangl wanted the camp to appear more attractive, so he ordered the paths to be paved and flowers planted along the sides near the camp headquarters and SS living quarters. He avoided direct interactions with the prisoners and was rarely seen, except when greeting new prisoner transports. Dressed in his distinctive and all-white linen riding coat and carrying a whip, Stangl became known to the prisoners as White Death. After the war, Stangl claimed that his actions were not driven by ideology or hatred of Jews. He explained that he viewed the prisoners as material objects rather than people, gradually becoming desensitized to their extermination, seeing them merely as cargo to be destroyed. Reflecting on this transformation, Stangl stated, "To tell the truth, one did become used to it. They were cargo. I think it started the day I first saw the extermination area in Treblinka. I remember Verd standing there next to the pits full of black-blue corpses. It had nothing to do with humanity. It could not have. It was a mass of rotting flesh." Christian Verd said, "What shall we do with this garbage? I think unconsciously that started me thinking of them as cargo. I rarely saw them as individuals. It was always a huge mass. I sometimes stood on the wall and saw them in the tube which led to the gas chambers. They were naked, packed together, running, being driven with whips." Around this time, Stangl also began drinking heavily, describing it as his way of coping with the situation, taking a large glass of brandy to bed each night, a habit that reflected his increasing detachment from the atrocities he oversaw. In September 1942, Stangl oversaw the construction of new, larger gas chambers to increase the camp's killing capacity. These new gas chambers became operational in early autumn of that year. It is believed that they had a maximum capacity of 22,000 deaths in a 24-hour period. When the new gas chambers were completed, Stangl reportedly remarked to the SS men who were with him, "Finally, the Jewish city is ready." During its operations from July 1942 to October 1943, at least 700,000 people were murdered at Treblinka, making it one of the deadliest Nazi extermination camps. The camp was closed after a prisoner revolt in August 1943, during which some prisoners managed to escape, leading the Nazis to dismantle the camp in an effort to cover up the atrocities committed there. In August 1943, Stangl, along with Odilo Globochnik, was transferred to Trieste in Italy, where he helped organize operations against Yugoslav partisans and local Jews. Due to illness, he returned to Vienna in early 1945. At the end of the war, Stangl fled without attempting to hide his identity. He was detained by the Americans in 1945 and later briefly imprisoned, but in May 1948 he escaped to Italy with his former colleague from Sobibor, Gustav Wagner. With the assistance of Austrian Roman Catholic Bishop Alois Hudal, a Nazi sympathizer, Stangl was able to flee through a ratline, eventually reaching Syria using a Red Cross passport. The ratlines were systems of escape routes for German Nazis and other fascists fleeing Europe from 1945 onwards in the aftermath of World War II. Stangl's wife and family joined him in Syria, where they lived for 3 years. In 1951, they moved to Brazil, where Stangl found work at a Volkswagen assembly plant south of São Paulo. Although Austrian authorities were aware of Stangl's role in the mass murder, an arrest warrant was not issued until 1961. Despite being registered under his real name at the Austrian consulate in São Paulo, it took another 6 years before Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal tracked him down. Stangl was arrested by Brazilian federal police in February 1967. He never used a false identity during his escape. Until today, it remains unclear why it took so long to capture him. After being extradited to West Germany, he was tried for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. Stangl admitted to these killings, but claimed, "My conscience is clear. I was simply doing my duty. At police training school, they taught us that the definition of a crime must meet 4 requirements. There has to be a subject, an object, an action, and intent. If any of these 4 elements is missing, then we are not dealing with a punishable offense. I could apply this to my own situation. If the subject was the government, the object the Jews, and the action the gassing, I could tell myself that for me, the 4th element, intent, I called it free will, was missing." If Stangl thought that these words would impress the court, he was wrong. On the 22nd of December 1970, the Schwergericht Düsseldorf court in West Germany found Stangl guilty and sentenced him to the maximum punishment permitted under West German law, life imprisonment. Gita Sereni, an Austrian-born British journalist with an aristocratic background, spent weeks in 1971 interviewing Stangl, trying to understand his motivation to participate in the mass murder of Jews. Sereni described Stangl as a primitive Austrian provincial man who, in the context of the Holocaust, would never think of himself as an evil man, but rather as a pure organizer. He said to her, "I have never intentionally hurt anyone myself. My guilt is that I am still here. That is my guilt." One can only wonder what the estimated 1 million victims who died under his watch would have thought of such a chillingly detached perspective on their suffering and death. Franz Stangl was 63 years old when on the 28th of June 1971 he died of heart failure 19 hours after the conclusion of his interview with Gita Sereni in Düsseldorf prison. There were no tears shed for Franz Stangl. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.